on. Um, let's see here. Somebody asked, this is kind of a topic that's going on right now. Jeanette asked, if we were being harassed by ICE or we witnessed someone being assaulted by ICE, can we call the police department? What is the Porterville PD stance on that matter? You know, obviously there's a lot of things that are making the news. For the most part, you know, what I'd say is usually what we see on camera or in the news has been heavily edited, or you see after fact matters. You're not seeing the buildup before the cameras are rolling or edited. But, you know, ICE is doing their job. You know, whether you agree or disagree with the policy of the federal government, these people were sworn oath to uphold the Constitution and the duties of their job. Same thing like police department, same thing like council members. We take an oath to follow the rules. The best thing, if you happen to see something that you disagree with or you don't like, you believe something may be illegal, the best thing you do is just record, kind of document it. I don't know if they all have body cameras for ICE and federal agencies. I know Porterville PD does. Could you call PD? Usually when an agency like that comes into another person's jurisdictions, they're given notice, so Porterville Police Department would be aware that they're there. I would imagine maybe our chief of police would ask an officer to kind of shadow them, and not to stop what they're doing, but just in case the local residents are concerned that there is local representation that's aware of what's happening. It's being recorded on their body cams. But just got documentation, get license plates, if you can get a badge ID number, so you can file a complaint, you know. But I would never tell you to interject yourself physically into any incident, you know. I think there's a difference between disagreement and then putting not just yourselves in harm's way, but even the officers. They have a very difficult job. They don't know your intentions. There's bad actors who also have their faces covered, it's hard to identify if they commit a crime. If they're assaulting officers or doing something like that. You know, they're focused on one person typically if they're trying to make an arrest or detention. And when there's a crowd around them, they don't see your hands, they don't see what you're doing. They've got too many things going on, people shouting, and it's really disorienting for them. So just don't put yourself in a dangerous position just because you dislike something. The best thing I could say is stand back, give them space. Don't make them feel that they're in a corner, or they something bad could happen potentially to them, because at the end of the day, they want to go home too. I don't believe any of these individuals put on their badge and go into work saying, I might hurt somebody, or I might die, or I might, you know, go to prison because I did something unlawful. Their intentions is to uphold the law, whether we agree or disagree. Again, there's a way to do it that doesn't put everybody in a dangerous position. Let's see some other questions down here. Somebody's asking about speed bumps. Two different people asked about speed bumps. Kind of slowing traffic on different roads. This is typically in the downtown area. The only thing I would say is those can be dangerous. Imagine a vehicle pursuit. Imagine an ambulance or a fire truck trying to get to a call, and they have to slow down. Sometimes really those seconds is a matter of life and death. So as much as we hate, you know, speeding drivers and stuff like that, I think the putting speed bumps on in a public road is kind of setting up for some dangerous situations. You know, unintended consequences, obviously, because the intention was to try and get people to follow the law. I think somebody asked a question. I saw that, you know, more traffic officers. Porterville's in 4 different sections for the police department. They have they're assigned to that section of the city. So those individuals those officers really get to know their community, those neighborhoods a lot better, the parks, the busy areas with homeless encampment, gang activity, drug activity, car thefts. They really get to know their section, and they know the hot spots. But traffic is an ongoing problem. You know, red light runners, stop sign runners, distracted drivers on their phones. I get it. I see it all the time, and I'm sure I'm guilty at some point of myself being a distracted driver. You know, I did ask a couple of different times for the chief if they can, not our interim yet, he's only been there I think like 2 months, but the past chief to do, they call saturation, trying to think of the words right now, but a detail, saturation detail. We'll do like distracted driving, kind of what they do with DUIs. They'll do a checkpoint. But they could do that for, you know, cell phone use or red lights or speeding. This is sometimes where you'll see like Farmersville or Tulare or Exeter officers in each other's towns. Is because they're doing a collaborative effort, saturation detail specific to a certain problem. And so I'll definitely reach out to the chief and see if that's something, you know, it's finances. You know, we have to pay, you know, for those officers to come, and overtime potentially, and all these different things behind the scenes. Not that it's not warranted, it's a matter of them fitting it in their schedules and finances to do one. But I think that's a big problem. A lot of people have that same complaint as with traffic. But as far as speed bumps, I think that would be a setting something, again, unintended consequences of some dangerous situations with, you know, officers chasing somebody in emergency vehicles. Let's see, rails for trails. Somebody's asking about the rails for trails and the length. I don't know the exact, it should be completed the end of this year, the Butterfield one. But again, there's 3 main trails. They go from, the Tule River Parkway goes from basically Highway 65, where behind Lowe's, Lowe's area there. And it goes all the way to Fallen Heroes Park, which it just opened up a couple of months ago. We did a ribbon cutting. It's beautiful trailway and goes along the river. Really, really nice. And then the next parkway is Santa Fe, which was completed, I want to say a year and a half, 2 years ago. And that's the Santa Fe Trail. That's kind of the east side trail, which goes from Santa Fe School there on, I believe it's Orange or Date there, and goes all the way to Henderson, where our new community center will be. Wonderful design. If you see some of the work, it's incorporating the plants in the area. There's focal points, historical points, informational points that show the plants and animals in the area. There's also 2 playgrounds along the trail with some benches and rest areas. There's actually a bike repair station, so you can do some minimal work if you have a issue with a bicycle. There's an exercise one near Santa Fe Senior Complex there on Putnam. They have some exercise equipment there. It's really, really neat. And then obviously Butterfield will go from Porterville College all the way to North Grand with lighted crossing areas. I don't know the total maybe mileage of all of it combined, but it's quite a lot. Let's go on to, let's see. Speed bumps, status of the Armory. So the council gave direction in our last meeting to close the Armory at the end of February because it's out of funding. I spoke earlier about the some loud music from my little toy over here the kids are riding in. Let me pause here for a second, let it pass. Pretty interesting there. I don't know if you guys can still hear it, but anyhow, it's pretty loud back here. So on the Armory, you know, part of the problem is, you know, the state didn't help the homeless problem. You know, a lot of people are aware of the $24 billion that the state said they spent on homelessness, and you know, in our area, I'd say at least Tulare County, you can't tell that they did it much for that kind of money. But locally for Porterville, the Armory was a place, it wasn't an answer, but it was a place when we had a lot of complaints from residents, complaints from you know, people using the park, business owners on Main Street, and just in the downtown area who were saying the homeless were encamping on their land or, you know, their properties and creating, you know, problems. the cities, took it upon itself when there was the flood fight back in 2022 to open up the Armory for temporary, evacuations. And it was also a solution for the homeless. They could then, have a safe place, and there's no services there. There's no feeding. There's no showers. We did have showers at one point there, though, but unfortunately they were vandalized, and it was getting expensive for the city to operate, so we got rid of them. The building has kind of been abandoned by the state. The state owns the property. The city's leasing it for $1 a year. But the expenditure comes from utilities, the guards that we have there to oversee. The Armory opened from 8 p.m. and it closes at 8 a.m. And so, again, it was just a safe place for people to sleep, especially with the weather, women, the vulnerable people out there. Again, our navigation center can only hold 30 people. So when we did our point in time, which we're actually going to be doing this next Wednesday, which is we'll go out and count the homeless in our community. We physically go out and find them. It was over 300 people. So when you have our navigation center can hold 30, there's essentially almost 300 more that don't have a place. And so I know there was a lot of negative connotation to the homeless given by some members of the public and the mayor and vice mayor about drug use and criminal element. And I not that they don't exist, I'm not blind to those individuals, but if you actually really go down to the Armory, you would see it's mostly the vulnerable, the elderly, the disabled. They know there's no drugs allowed. They know there's no alcohol, stuff like that, and they abide by those rules. Most of it is mental health. A lot of it is just people unfortunately fell in really bad circumstances, and sometimes 3 or 4 times over. Family dynamics, finances, health, a lot of things come into play. And so I was trying to fight and keep it open, at least during inclement weather. The complaint was it's $400,000 a year to operate. If we did it during the inclement weather, we cut the price in half, $200,000. I felt, frustrated as, the council spending money on bus wraps, on new bus stops, $150,000 on the Freedom Fest, extra $150,000 in community promotions to do these celebratory things for the 250 year for America and 100 year for the city charter. All the flags on Main Street, the George Washington Monument. I'm like, we're finding money for all these different things. I don't see how we couldn't find $200,000, because what's the cost of these homeless individuals going into the downtown businesses, going onto Main Street? It was unfortunate that basically the answer was, jail. These people need to get a criminal record. That's going to help their situation, and there's not a good answer for any of these problems. But, to push this off, I think the vice mayor said, it's the kind of churches need to step up. The churches weren't built to have housing for homeless. There's some care and stuff that they provide, but it's minimal. These bigger kind of problems become kind of government problems, welfare state. When the county closed the dump, on Teapot Dome, we started doing spring and fall cleanups where people could come dump their trash for free, because we knew it was a problem. We didn't say it was not our problem. We didn't create it. County, it's your fault. The city stepped up and said, we're going to spend X amount of dollars to try and make our community cleaner because we know there's a problem with the landfill. We didn't turn our back on it. And so, especially given that these are people, that it's kind of troublesome to see all the "in God we trust" and the patriotism, and then, this kind of tough love approach of, it's somebody else's problem, and, if this doesn't fit what they want, well, it's kind of we're washing our hands of this problem. Somebody let them go somewhere else. And so I just, on a personal note, I kind of had a problem with that kind of messaging, that it's the criminal element and not our problem. Especially, again, like I said, I made the comments about all the other money we're spending on so many other things. I'll kind of get to finishing up here. Somebody asked about the George Washington Monument. That was something that the vice mayor, it's kind of more of a pet project to celebrate America's 250th anniversary. You know, my comment being on the council for 3 years, we did a parks master study in 2024. I think roughly 300 people from the community input, just, you know, downtown businesses, different organizations, all had input on this study. I think it took like 9 months to do the study. And nowhere did it talk about a historical monument, you know, especially something specific to a George Washington that was needed in our community. People were asking for, you know, restore the bathrooms, more arbors, more shade, more drinking fountains, more play structures, stuff like that. But no one really talked about, you know, a patriotic monument. So I was not opposed to a monument per se. My argument we had about 2 weeks ago, or 2 meetings ago, which was probably over a month ago, was most of these things that are built in our community that are specific to monuments are privately funded. You know, we collaborate with different organizations, fundraising efforts, donations that pay for that kind of stuff. You know, the farmer statue, the plane out by the airport, the march, Time Marches On, the Buck Schaefer Monument at Centennial Park. These are all privately funded. You know, there's no taxpayer dollars that go to this stuff. The Veterans one, helicopter at Veterans Park, all this are all privately funded. So again, I wasn't opposed. I would have approved 100% if there were private donations and stuff. But just to go off the top of general funds, when we have a hiring freeze, when we're raising rate increases for certain things, to me it's a problem with the messaging and, you know, being a good steward of the tax dollars to say this monument is a priority. We're doing it now. You know, this was nowhere in the city's plan. We call it CIPs, critical infrastructure projects. This came out of nowhere. This was, I want it, I got the votes, we're putting it in. And so it's a little disheartening to see kind of my perspective, again, kind of the misuse and my understanding of being a good steward of taxpayer dollars, understanding our role in government. I think the mayor, at some point we're talking about the library and people were talking about literacy. The mayor, Meister at the time, was saying, you know, that's the school's job is for literacy. Well, you could say that same argument for patriotism, history. Maybe it's a school's job to do that, you know. So again, I'm not opposed to those types of things being built in our community. I have a really big problem using taxpayer dollars for that, especially when it was, you know, kind of came out of nowhere and was like, I want this, because specifically, if this was 5 years ago or 5 years from now and it wasn't 250-year anniversary, would we still be doing this? I don't think we would. And then real quick, I think the last two was somebody's talking about a sports complex for the kids, our baseball complex. You know, we did approve of a design to add 2 more ball fields to the sports complex. Because when it was initially built, I think they spent $5 million developing, and they didn't have all the money to build out the sports complex the way they wanted to. A little bit of my concern with the ball fields, it's not building the ball fields I have a problem with. There's been a lot of talk about making it a baseball competition destination specific to baseball. And I have a real concern with that because there's a lot of other sports in our community. I think soccer is the #1 sport in our city as far as actual participant numbers. And so, you know, I'm okay with building other ball fields, but when we say, hey, we want to build it specifically for baseball and for competition, that's very concerning, because to keep up ball fields, you have to need certain soil, certain grass, certain lighting, certain bleachers. You know, concession stand probably has to be redone. Bathrooms have to be redone. You're talking multi-million-dollar project for something that's specific to baseball, not multi-use. And the level of care that's going to need is going to be a constant care, because you don't want gopher holes, thorns, all these different problems. And the reason I say it's concerning is because the Porterville Little League, over say 20 years ago, was begging the city to help them with their, you know, with the Porterville Little League, because they're using like Zalad Park and some other places. And they said, please build us a place. You know, that's all we're begging for, is we want a place to play ball. So in conjunction with the Burton School District, the city of Porterville built the ball fields out there and the parking lot. And here it is 20 years later, and they're saying, hey, we need help. We can't afford to operate this place. And so last year, in the mayor's direction was, hey, we're going to charge half the cost for utilities, and we're going to make a $2,500 donation to the organization. And wanting to promote youth, yeah, we want to promote youth, but when it goes to a private nonprofit there, and we're giving them money to operate, the city already has baseball leagues. We already have all that stuff, with minimal costs. And so when this organization is saying, hey, we need help, we're not sustainable, then there's talk about expanding ball fields in a possibly a baseball centric, complex. I'm like, no, there's already a red flag. You show me you're profitable, you show me a long-term business plan, this is functional for the city so the taxpayers aren't subsidizing this, then we can talk. But there's already there's a lot of behind the scenes people who are attached to Porterville Little League. And I think, again, I'm not saying it's doing favors, but when you're in that circle, you're not aware of there's, local football teams that could really use some care or support. I believe Granite Hills, there was a youth football coach that physically came in front of city council and asked for a donation similar to what council gave to Little League and fast pitch softball, and they didn't give them any money. So again, it's kind of concerning who gets money and what projects are getting pushed through versus the bigger, there's not a lot of basketball courts in our community. I'm hoping when the sports complex behind the new library on Olive and Vallarta there, they're going to have a big sports complex, and I believe there's supposed to be some basketball courts and I think a tennis court and some other fields for soccer. But I think it's a little narrow-minded or narrow-sighted to see building a complete sports complex dedicated to baseball when the organization already isn't sustainable. So that's a little bit, because the person said, they need more stuff for baseball, but we've got swimmers in our town. Do we need to build another pool? We have football, local champions in our community. We need more football fields with all that. But, again, I'll say when you're in leadership role and you have people that are your supporters and donors and they're asking for this type of stuff, you kind of start to see why certain things are getting built. Talking back to the George Washington Monument, the Daughters of the Revolution were given $2,500 recently from the City Council, and magically now they're going to have a plaque at the George Washington Monument. So, I'm not saying it's done with bad intentions, but it is there. It is happening. And I think I'll end it with this one. Somebody asked, it was an anonymous one, did I achieve anything I wanted to as a city council member? And then the second part of the question, seems we do nothing from commissions and committee reports. So I'll speak about committee and commission reports. They deal with one aspect, a certain department, whether it's art, there's the art commission, sport, parks and leisures. There's now a downtown committee. I'm on the cannabis committee. There's a myriad of different committees and commissions. And all they do is look at that one aspect, and then they give a report to the city council, because it's really hard as a council member to follow everything in detail. So we ask those organizations to then kind of kick around ideas and problem solve, and then bring their ideas or recommendations to the city council, and then we can kind of look through it and see what direction we'll give. So I think in our last meeting I was kind of complaining about there's a lot of times that we may not get a report for many of these committees or commissions for maybe 6 months, and I think that's I think it's important that those chairs give us our reports. They met, they spent the time. I've got an ice cream truck coming here. It is a sunny day here. I won't say too warm, but more than we're used to. Sorry. The last thing is, something about what did I get out of, or go to it. Did I achieve anything I wanted to as a city council member? I didn't come into this, my campaign or anything to say, I want X, Y, and Z done. I came into it green, not knowing exactly how city government was ran, And so I didn't come in it having very strong opinions about what I think the city needed to do. Once I learned it, I speak about it in whatever our agenda items are. I think the biggest achievement I can say I had is, or I feel confident with, is that I represented the people. I didn't vote with my political agenda. I didn't vote with my religious agenda. I didn't vote with my pride or, you know, it was all about serving the people, being a good servant, being a good steward of the tax dollars. Are there things I believe I would like to see in our community? Of course I would, but that's putting my perspective out there. Even though all the council members are equal, the mayor's no different than the vice mayor is no different than the council. It's just entitled and to run the meetings, but we all have equal vote. No one is above the other. But did I achieve? I hope what I achieved was, I think, what I say, just respect that I did a good job. Whether people agreed with me or disagreed, that when I spoke about an item, when I showed up at my committee meetings, I was prepared, I was knowledgeable, and I explained what I felt was the best idea or decision. So if people, I just hope that people respected my approach to the job. If I achieved their confidence, then I would say I achieved my goal. I didn't come into this thinking that I could do this alone, or I knew everything, or again, my perspective was the right one. I'm a learner by nature. That's my number one strength. When I was campaigning, I didn't say I was going to change the city. I didn't say I was going to, do this or do that. My whole thing was, I'm going to learn, and when something comes up, I'll try and share, just like our Q&A events. I think my learner comes out in these. What I've learned, I want to teach you. I want you to have a better understanding of your local government, of operations, of how things, whether it's businesses come in or why trails were done. Those are all grants, by the way. All the trails were done with grant money. No local Porterville tax dollars go into these things. I'm going to try and do one every month. Again, I did the first two in person. This one's virtual. See how this one goes. Again, please share this with others. There'll be a breakdown in the video of the timestamps. You can just click on the timestamp and it'll take you right to that part of the video. Again, I hope I've been a good servant of the community, a good steward of the tax dollars, and where I fall short, please, I don't mind criticism, and it helps me serve better. And just again, thank you for your time. I know I tried to make this video as fast as I could, but even each one of these things, I could probably go on another 10 or 15 minutes just so you have a better understanding of the process. But there'll be other videos and other opportunities for Q&As to come in the future. So again, thank you for spending your time to listen to this and understand the perspective that I see from the seat. And just thank you again. I hope you all stay safe, and hopefully this weather turns around for our spring, and look forward to seeing you out in the community at all our many events.